Okay, welcome class. Hi, I'm Daniel. I am your comics teacher. We're talking about Akane-banashi for our second lecture here. If this is your new or your first time to this class, we are going through every episode of Akane-banashi that comes out this season, and we will be looking at the chapters from the manga it's based on and the adaptation. And so we'll talk a little bit about the anime, a little bit about the manga, but really kind of using this as like just a window into some discussions around comics craft, whether you are someone who's interested in writing comics or illustrating comics, or if you're just a comics reader and want to just find different ways to appreciate the art. I spoke about this a little bit last week, but I do believe that comics literacy is a skill. I think a lot of us pick up visual literacy skills just from the world we are in. It's very visual. So watching movies, watching TV, reading signs, a lot of things are kind of speaking to us in visual literacy or in visual ways, graphic ways. This is stuff that won't be cut. This stuff just gets part of the ramble. And so I'm just hoping to, I think, share some of the things that I find really exciting about this medium, and hopefully you will too. So, class, today's agenda, we've got some reminders. We've got a new feature called our adaptation report. I don't know if I'd like the name of that, but we're calling it that for now. We'll have our actual lecture, and then we'll talk a little bit about comics vocab to kind of close things out. And if you stick around to the end, after all of that, I'm also going to try to record some YouTube shorts live, which will certainly be a mess. I've got two really small talking points that will kind of get into what our lecture's talking about. It's like a little bit of a bonus, a little itty bitty lecture afterwards. But then just trying to make the production for this a little easier. When do we resolve the cliffhanger from last time? I will speak to the cliffhanger from last time. I don't know the right balance of will people have watched things, will they not have watched things, what's the spoiler territory or not. I'm going to do everything I can to not spoil things from the manga, and I will probably do we'll talk about the episode, and if we hit the big moment of the episode, I'll maybe highlight that. But yes, the cliffhanger at the end of last episode, Akane's father does die. Just kidding. That's a fun meme in the Akane-banashi fandom. Is he dead? Did Shinta die? And some people say that his fate is worse than death. He becomes a concrete salesman and makes more money and has a happier life in that direction. But Akane's life is notably worse because of it, because she loves her father's art. And I think it's just a delightful kind of subversion of that dead parent trope, in that what our parents mean to us can mean more than one thing. I heard that Rakugo was the name of her sled. I feel like there's a pun here that I'm not picking up, but I you know what? We got keep. This is distractions from the class. If you can quit making jokes that I don't understand. But let's get going. Class reminders. So first of all, Citizen Kane. See, speaking of literacy, I've got some bad film literacy. There's so many film classics I know nothing about that I'm I should watch one of those, and I just will maybe one day. First of all, do please support the anime and the manga via the official channels. In the Americas, you can watch Akane-banashi on the YouTube channel. I believe in May the dub will be coming to Netflix, and then there's a variety of ways to watch it around the world. I don't think it's in every country right now legally, which is unfortunate. But I won't necessarily speak to ways you can watch it otherwise. But then in the US, you can also read it in the Shonen Jump app, or I believe in the Manga Plus app as well. So please do support that. The first 3 chapters of all the series are free to read, as are the most recent 3. So while you maybe have to pay to catch up the middle, once you're caught up, you can actually close your subscription and just keep following along. Field trip permission slips due. Make sure those are signed, bring them in, due next week. And then live streams every Tuesday from now until June 23rd on this channel. Here's where I'll plug the, hey, please please subscribe, turn notifications so that if I go live, you'll get that little ping. We'll talk about, we're going to go to a Rakugo cafe. We talked about this last week, I think. Maybe not. Rakugo Cafe is what the field trip's for. And then questions, please ask them, if you've asked them in the chat here, or if you're watching the VODs of these later and you want me to talk about something, or if you read, or you watched the latest episode and you have questions about it, don't hesitate to post those in the comments, and we can kind of, I think, spend some of this class time just talking and reacting some questions there. Yeah, we're gonna go to our Rakugo cafe. Assuming we can all get our permission slips signed and buy plane tickets to Japan next week. And that brings us to our first full section of the day, which is our adaptation report. I was kind of curious about this myself, and I figured, hey, let's make it part of the class proper. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at how many chapters were adapted, and then throughout the season we will update kind of projections. So starting with last week's episode, which was called That Day, and the chapter was based on what's called On That Day, so interesting little editorialization there. Adapted 52 pages. Pretty traditional, I feel, for like a manga to anime first chapter to first episode. Usually the first chapter is like 2 to 3 times the length of a standard chapter in Shonen Jump, and so the anime will usually just adapt that all at once. And then this episode honestly shocked me. It adapted 3 chapters for a total of 66 pages, which I think, kind of squeezed things together a bit. So we'll talk a little bit more as we get in, but just a quick summary. 6 years serves as kind of a catch-up, what happened. So we see at the end of the last chapter, we see Akane who's grown up from her younger self. And this chapter picks up with her, I think she's 17 at the start. She's been training underneath her father's old mentor, Shinta. Shinta's her father. Oh gosh, I'm forgetting her teacher's name, but I'll get to that at some point. She's been training kind of like in private, and then at the end of chapter 2, he gets a call from the Rakugo cafe owner asking for a quick someone can fill in this afternoon because their performer had some issues and won't be able to get there on time. And she is sent off to do her first professional gig. Chapter 3 is called First Performance. It features her first performance. That's what we're going to be talking a lot about today. And then chapter 4 is called Who Is That? And is about one of her main rivals in this series called, I think it's Kaisei Arakawa, and features a story that he puts on. So a lot of content here, and I remember even chatting with some people online about how much they will adapt, and I figured it would maybe just get through the end of chapter 3 or tease some of chapter 4. The trailer showed as much of showing him be like, you should watch my performance, and I thought it would probably end there, but no, we actually see the whole performance, get through that whole chapter. So this is a very exciting chart that when you only have 2 data points and then you average them and project them outwards, there's just a straight line. So chapter 2 has adapted 3 more chapters. If we kind of keep this trend, this is kind of where we might go along. I was super wrong last week. I thought that the lecture, the chapters that my lecture were based on that I skipped last week were around chapter 50. They're chapter 15 to 17. So we'll definitely be getting them in the season. I'm guessing we're going to get them in this cur, which is exciting. So I'll be able to kind of close the loop on that, because a lot of last week's content was built as the first half of understanding to then talk about that chapter specifically. And so now we get the exciting part of we get to catch up to that. We'll talk about that story. I won't get into it just yet. And what's even more exciting for me is when I taught this lecture originally, it was only an hour long, and so I couldn't talk about the second piece of this. It was a big hook for me to get people to read the series. But now we'll get to the episodes that adapt it, and we can talk about those things, and I'm super excited to get there. And we'll probably get there, based on this, maybe around episode 6. I also just started to plot the total pages adapted, which again, it's projecting 700 by episode 12, and I kind of doubt that. I'm actually trying to think how many. There's 200 chapters, roughly 20 chapters each. That's what, 4,000? Did I do that math right? I don't think we're gonna be adapting this much this season. This little white line is my this will decrease. We're gonna curve this down. I'm guessing, that we kind of did a lot of work this episode to kind of move us past that second episode, get some of the underlying groundwork done. Oh gosh, I shouldn't speak too much because I'm going to get into what our lecture's about. So we'll use this as our transition into the lecture. Today's lecture I'm calling Units of Storytelling. I think I gave this thing 13 different names before landing here. It was episode versus chapters and arcs and things. We're going to call it Units of Storytelling. And even that name, I don't know if I like. But the kind of fun, spicy YouTube title is, did the anime nerf Akane? Did they make her performance weaker? So today's big questions we are asking is, which of Akane's performances is stronger, anime or manga? Or in the anime or manga? how do we know, or how would we prove it? Why might they have changed their performance? And they being, the production team, the directors and writers and whoever else is involved in that. Why maybe would they have changed their performance? And so we need to talk about the performance. So the performance in chapter 3 and then again in episode 2 is called Scared of Manju. I believe it's pronounced, or in Japanese it's Manju Kawaii. It's a short comedic story. When I saw Katsura Sunshine perform Rakugo 2 weeks ago now, he actually performed an adaptation of the story for us. It was really cool. He performed it at the request of the studio because they knew they were going to be covering the story in the second episode. And he was saying that, I believe this is correct, that this is normally like a very beginner story, but since he had to fill more time, he actually intermixed other stories into it. I thought it was really cool. That's one of the things I've learned to love about Rakugo from this manga, is learning how they kind of how adaptation is actually at the heart of the storytelling, because you are often telling stories that you have heard or you've had other people tell, and so how you shift it, how you change it, becomes a piece of who you are. I believe I should not just be saying this, but I believe Banashi kind of comes from Akane-banashi is like Akane's style or art form, or like her way of doing things. And so I believe that's kind of the heart of the series is what we bring to it. So his performance took this, what was normally a beginner story that's around 10-15 minutes. I think he probably made it 25-30. He put in a whole other story that I had heard before, I'd known of through this series, so it's cool to see him start to switch into that, and it's nested and it's really cool, and we will get into all that down the line. But here it is very much a beginner story. It's short, it's comedic, ends with a big punchline, as many of them do, and the piece of culture you might need to know is manju is a type of pastry. It's a Japanese filled pastry. Usually I think sweet or savory, and so yeah, the story, I'm going to read this description, comes from the manga. Oftentimes, you see this in the anime as well, when a story is performed, someone in the audience, someone who's observing, will remark on what the story is, and they will tell you the basic structure of the story, which to me is really fascinating, to be like, hey, you're about to hear the story, here's what the story is, because they're often trimming down what we see of the story. We only ever get, a 10th, a 20th, a 100th. And so this is the definition, or at least the description from the chapter, as translated by the Shonen Jump team. In this story, the young men of town banter about what they're most afraid of, with one claiming that he's afraid of nothing. He then admits, however, that there's one thing that can cause him to faint with fright: manju buns. This, however, is an outright lie. The other men resolve to confront him with a whole bunch of manju to frighten him. So that's the story. Is they're talking about what scares them. He says manju buns. They say, sure, bring a whole ton of them. And as you see in the episode in the manga, he's lying. He acts afraid as he eats these delicious treats. And it's just a very fun little performance. So if you have watched and read both forms, I want you to think for a second, what performance did you feel was stronger? If you've just watched the anime, so you've only been watching the anime, you've read episode 1, 2, I want you to actually compare her performance to her father's performance in episode 1. And if you've watched neither, thank you for being here, I appreciate it. Just think about something that you're scared of. Or if you don't want to share anything you're scared of, a tasty treat that you would like people to bring to you, that you could eat and act scared of. And as I said last time, I will leave in a little bit of space for thinking. I was going to make a nice little animated timer thing to show, but instead we're just gonna relax and vibe with some music while we think. And no need to write or share those things if you don't want to. Envy says that typically they're filled with anko, which is like a red bean paste. I didn't know red bean paste was called that. It also explains there is one pun that is not fully translated in the manga or the anime, and they don't even add you the little like the thing you get, I think, in like the fan translations where they're like parentheses or asterisks. Here's a giant description at the top of the screen for you to pause and read that describes it, because there's a pun when they present him with the manju. They go, it's an on assassination, and yeah, they definitely make a pun, I think, off the word Anko. I don't know why they didn't add any clarifying statements in the Shonen Jump app. They usually do for puns that they don't fully translate, but hey, it is what it is. So, yeah, like I said, there's a few things to think through, whether you felt this performance was stronger in one or the other, just the anime, and I think it's pretty clear, maybe for me asking the question, that where I stand, but I don't want to skew results too much here. It's okay. This is honestly just a think about. I don't even necessarily. You only read the manga, sure. So, oh yeah, I didn't really give you that option, huh? That's incredible. Well, we're going to kind of go through some of the anime stuff, and you get to maybe think through it. And also, if you've read it, like I think it was months ago, I doubt you remember, but that's okay, because we're still going to summarize both. Before we get into the performance, though, I do want to review from last week. What were some of the manga/comic techniques used in Chapter 1 to depict the qualities of a Rakugo performance? So we focus a lot on like speech, but there's lots of things happening. And while my question here is about the manga and comic techniques, if you can even think about things that happened in the anime and the clips we showed last week, what were techniques that were used to depict the qualities of a Rakugo performance? Yeah, so we've got, Envy says, there was a style of speech bubble, the reactions on the faces of the audience. Yes, so, in summary, one of the ones we highlighted was the unique balloon shapes. So here we have got Shinto's performing two different characters. We can tell, because we have these sort of like rigid balloons with little points in between, and these sort of like wobbly balloons. Mirrored expressions. So we have in this panel here, Akane was telling a story, and we see that sort of mirrored expression and pose from the bully. And then this other one we talked about too is like doppelgangers, where we kind of create these visual representations of things in the story that kind of live in the space around the storyteller. So, things that we saw in the anime last week are mirrored expressions and doppelgangers. We saw pretty close representations of both of these. Oh, welcome to class, Stephen. Your brother calls you Stephen on YouTube, so I'm gonna feel like I didn't just, name you there. Let me know if you want to cut that later. So both of these showed up in the anime last week. Of course, unique balloon shapes didn't show up in the anime, and I say of course, but they totally could still do that. They didn't show up, but we did have different voices, because now that we have vocal performances, we can have people actually performing different voices. We can hear those different voices. Other things, big expressions. So we see this often to like kind of help sell maybe the quality of the story, is that the more expressive the characters are. And of course, seeing that these are larger than life, we are in a visual medium where we can kind of stretch and skew with people's faces. Another lesson, I'll bring in Scott McCloud's like giant cool triangle of like realism to cartoon to like abstract. And as we travel through that, it tells us something about the story being told. We talked briefly about scale last week, because whereas the anime could play with time, like slow motion and speeding things up, and these minutia of some of the animations, one thing that it couldn't do is it could never really change the shape of the screen. Right, the screen is always going to be the same size. And one thing that the manga does is it'll go from small panels to larger panels. This right here is a spread. So this is 2 pages, and so they've put him really big on the page to kind of again highlight this performance. And then, and as you said too, the faces of the audience, the reaction. So here we have a few people kind of reacting. I don't know how clearly that comes through. But we've got some happy expressions. We've got the cheers, the rahs, the clapping. So some of that commentary also speaks to the quality of the performance. I think in a lot of ways, I think, and you brought up last week, like point of view, like a lot of this we could and should perceive to maybe be from Akane's point of view. She loves her father, so she's maybe seeing this as larger than life. But one thing that I think we kind of have to like hold as maybe truth, or at least within the world of the story, is if someone has an internal monologue that only that person has, and they're saying, I like this performance, or I think this is really strong, or this is really good, we at the very least have to trust that they do believe those things. And so we can often use that as sort of a like, well, was that impressive? Yes or no? And so oftentimes our lens in here is going to be the commentary of others. We'll definitely, I think, have a lesson about that later on in depth. So now let's get to excuse me, the Scared of Manju performance. So this is, I'm going to try to like grab like moments from both. It's not going to be one-to-one, and I think one thing that's really fascinating is both the anime and manga will choose different lines of the story to put on the page. So the like I'm pretty sure the manga doesn't actually have the punchline of the story, whereas the anime does use the punchline. And then there are times where like we'll hop around a little bit, so it's really interesting. But for the most part, I'm trying to find like moments that we can compare one-to-one. So here's right towards the beginning. She's kind of talking in her like prologue. I think it's like Makura. I should have looked it up. I should have a little note sheet next to me of the proper terms. Right before the story starts, and here's kind of maybe our baselines for these performances. Yes, there's a slight difference in art style. So I think you often see this, I think, in a lot of anime, and you see like maybe a simplification of the art style. We'll talk about why that is a little bit later on. But otherwise, kind of a neutral start here. And then one of the first big things we see is in the story, we're talking about things that scare them. Sorry, Steve, I should tell you this about things that scare people, but this is probably the scariest screen of the whole thing. I should have given you a warning. There's a big snake. So in the anime, we see this sequence, and of course you'll notice I'm not showing you clips this week because last week all of my clips were flagged, including a half-a-second clip where I wasn't even playing the video. I was like scrubbing my like mouse over the timeline, and it did not like that. I don't want to have to go through and chop all those pieces out again. That was a little bit painstaking. So instead, we're going to just for right now use some screenshots, which I do believe fully robs the anime of one of its strengths, which is going to be animation and the sound. So we have this moment here where one of the characters is describing what scares them, and Akane in her performance kind of does like a little pose of this jaw, and then a pose for the tongue of the snake, and then on screen we get this sort of like glitch effect. There's like almost like only one frame where we have the snake that is that darker color. It's very almost like realistic kind of coloring or lighting, and then the one that kind of hovers on this page or hovers on the screen the most during it while it's animated is this very translucent, like blurry-ish and boosted kind of colored snake that's there for a moment. In the manga, that moment looks like this. There's a few panels. There's again like a panel for the arm going up, a panel for the hands and like the mouth pose, which again is all animated. But the snake is represented in this different way. So we have two very different choices here. One thing of note, I think, is when we looked at the doppelgangers in the anime and the manga from episode 1, while the like inkiness design was maybe not the same, they were very much the same like characters or renderings, or like character designs, whereas the renderings are a little different. Here we have different renderings and different designs. Speaking of reactions, here's our panel and then a screenshot from the animated reaction in which you go, damn, when they say adapt, they mean adapt, because look at this crowd. It's like kind of pretty damn close. They even got the like same chairs in there. In the anime, I can't show you this. It's like it just has a scrolling pan, and you get some motion lines along the top and the bottom. And I think he maybe shakes just a little bit. But otherwise, that's kind of a reaction here. Which, if you ask me, I think in both cases it's a little hard to fully read. He's like nervous, but not necessarily like scared, but definitely a little bit like, oh, I think on edge is maybe like my reading of it. And this is where we're going to diverge a little bit. One thing in the manga, as I was reading rereading these is we start having the other characters in the story describe what scares them. And here we get this great panel that shows 3 wildly different expressions, wildly different poses, paired with different word balloons, and we get the impression that these are 3 different speakers. Right, so not only are they saying different things, we kind of get this vibe, and we also get, I think, like 3 different kind of vibes for like what fear could look like, and of course there's one more big expression at the top of our main storytelling character here. So really big notable expressions. Another thing that is only in the manga is this. In the upper right, we see actually commentary from the cafe owner, who's saying that she has pure talent for Rakugo. And then we have her saying, what do I gotta be afraid of? And we get our doppelganger effect. We get that same pose. And it's this very larger than life sort of vibe. We sync back up the two a little bit with this sequence. So the characters at this point have brought the manju buns to scare our liar. And again, very good adaptation, like pose to pose. Rendering style is a little different, but very similar energy. But I'm just going to let this linger there for a second and say, what do y'all notice about this? The manju have manifested in the anime. Yeah. What's in front of the person? Exactly. Here's a big change. In the same way that the snake was rendered with a sort of like translucent, almost like sort of like cell screen on top of it. Yeah, we have like an illusion. And in the anime, we get this sequence, which is not exactly there in the manga. There's like 1 or 2 panels in the manga. Here we get like a really slowed down sequence of her reaching for the manju. She grabs it and she interacts with this like, illusion or this like ghostly sort of version of it. She splits it open. I wish I could, play this for you because the sound of like tearing it. One thing I'm just gonna say right now is the sound design, I think, for the show is going real hard, and I think you get in this moment like the tearing sound of this thing. I'm like, oh damn, I don't know, that sounded good. That sounded satisfying. Steven, you weren't in class yet. These are just little like treats, little pastries, often filled with like a red bean paste. So just a nice little snack. And then she eats it, and whereas the manga, I think, really only has like 1 panel of her like eating it, the anime like has her eating a few of them, and like full on like putting her hand in her mouth, licking her fingers like as she goes through it. It's very are the sound effects made with the mouth body? Good question. I will go back and listen. The sound effects that of the bread splitting, I would have to like slow down and think about it. One thing that I think will probably bother some people, and I think for me is like right on the edge of like, ugh, is like the sound of her like eating does like, you do hear it as sort of like the mouth sound of like someone making like the lip smacking sort of stuff, which didn't like make me like go but I think some people that just like is that unnerving sort of ASMR sort of vibe, but I think it's commitment to this moment of she's making a moment of it. Another thing that is in the anime that's not in the manga, and there's another shot here but I didn't screenshot it, is as people are watching her eat this fictional manju, they're grabbing for their cups. There's a guy in the front who kind of like gulps and like has that sort of moment of like, oh, he's hungry, and it's really cool. It's not stated outright. They aren't, there's a lot of things that are said in the commentary and are like hit really hard in the commentary, but there are some things that are understated that are kind of just like left to interpretation or for you as smart media viewers to bring up. But we see that she's making the audience thirsty, hungry. Like it's a really cool sort of understanding of maybe her storytelling ability. And then I'll say the story almost has like 2 closing beats. There's this one where I should hold it for here a second, where one of her like I'll say just schoolmates, keep it easy for now, who's there with her, is remarking on how she was scared before the performance, and now the scariest thing is her, and it's because of how talented she is. And so we get this image in the anime and a very similar image in the manga. And lastly, our crowd reactions. are these two. Again, I can't really show the anime. There's, I think, like hearty applause. It's definitely not like cheering. And in the manga, you know, the hands. Honestly, it's like it's such a funny thing, but we get to do this is go. Well, everyone's seated, and their hands are all kind of in front of them clapping. There's a few people in the manga whose like hands are above their heads. Like you can tell that there's like a little like maybe I think I read that as a little bit louder, even though you know we don't hear it in the manga exactly. So something kind of put out there. So these are our comparative performances, maybe summarized. And as I see in the chat, the yassified DLSS 5 glow up. I love that. So we've got this. I got sorry, Steven, don't worry about the snakes. Snakes come back. I think this is it for snakes. I think. Just a heads up. And I'll also warn you, at some point there will be ghost stories, Steven. And also, I will tempt you, Envy, at some point there will be ghost stories. Here are some of our comparisons, kind of put together. There's some things that are only held in one or the other. That's right, sure, I'm great. You like snakes. Snakes are like... I forgot. Snakes are like your one thing. We're all like, you're super chill with snakes. My bad. I love playing to the audience. Look, see, this is why I love this series, because I get to be really meta-contextual with it and remind me in like 2 weeks about playing to the audience, because that's the theme of an episode. These are our contrasts, and I think it's maybe worth considering that phrasing from last week of baseline and change. I use this to describe a story as you have to have something happening, some baseline, and then the change, and then boom, you've got a story. But then also in comics, baseline and change is this idea of like, what are you showing first, and then how do you manipulate that, and what does that manipulation say about it? And then I think what's exciting is we get in the world of adaptation, and we have our baseline, and what's there, and then what changes, and what does that say? It's not necessarily a story per se, but it is a judgment call. It is a choice there. And so we think about these two visual representations. I want us to think through which performance do you feel was stronger? I think this actually works out well. You both saw this kind of represented visually to you, very truncated. You maybe an imperfect judgment, but if you were just off of what you saw alone, what performance do you maybe think was stronger? Do you think that these are fair comparisons to even make, to compare one to the other as a sort of a determination of what it says about her performance? And maybe what do we gain from comparing them? And we want to get real big about it. What do we gain from comparing an anime and a manga and an adaptation, as we see a lot of people like to do online? How many words do you want these in essays? I mean, look, in a perfect world, we get some essays in here. No. Steven says, I mean, it feels like it's mostly subjective. I think I prefer the anime personally, but I couldn't say that objectively. Sure. Steven, I'm maybe I need to have it move to help me focus. Totally, right? I think that's a good answer. Like, which media do you prefer on its own? I'm going to ask you to abstract of just thinking between the two, not necessarily which is a better form of media, but if you think about what is the anime saying about her performance, and maybe what is the manga saying about her performance, based on what sort of things we see. I am curious if Envy is either looking at more facts about Manju or is typing out that 500-word comment. We may never know. Ooh, I love this. I feel like her performance was slightly better in the anime, but it was a slightly tougher crowd. Ooh, I like that a lot. I like because like right you as we change the dials on these different elements of performance, what does it say about? I like that. That's a fun read. I'm gonna push you to say like what makes you think it's slightly better in the anime versus the manga. And Steven says, I guess the anime seems more chill about it. There's more intensity, and it feels like in the manga, the actions are coming directly for her. The anime seem to have things that appear, that represented what's there. I don't know. Did it get cut off there? I'm not sure exactly why it's got that, but yeah, like the illusion, right? Like that effect, I think is pretty good. This is also so good, and I think one of the benefits of like teaching is getting to hear the perspectives, because like I get it coming to this my own thing. I think one thing that I want to get into this was like with fair comparisons, or even why do we get from comparing them, is recognizing the subjectivity of all of this, because it does kind of come down to, like, what do we think, and the subjectivity of performance I think is a fun little kind of conversation to couch this in, because for me I find that like the manga performance, as you say, is like more intense, and therefore I think they're like saying it's heightened, especially if we compare it to maybe like the first chapter, and you know, a lot of the things that we learn in the first chapter about what makes a good performance versus a bad one, where we get to see like Shinto's first one and his second one, we see her do more. That we see the doppelgangers, we see the varied balloons. I personally like the snake in the comic more than the anime, but I'm realizing as someone who's had one versus the other, that's a preference thing, right? I think seeing both and saying, ooh, I like this version more is interesting. And again, there's that whole the like sitting down and eating the manju and like taking the time with it, like that is a good sell. We get a like the vibe of that. And then and be a great point of like the commentary. The manga audience seems to dig it more. The anime audience is like, yeah, that was good. I want some manju maybe, right? So the thing I want to, state, and this is where it's a trick question. Oh, hold on. I'm seeing there's a character limit that was cut off. Delusions. Why in the heck? I am only seeing comments now show up in the. Oh, great. I've got it up on a different window. I'll just use this instead. Illusion subbing in for that. Character limit, cut it off. The manga illusion in the anime, her ending pose being more adorkable. Great use of adorkable. Yeah, I think the illusion really goes a long way. Like I said, personally, I like the manga more, but I think that's very subjective. I think that's just kind of where I'm coming from. But it is a shift in performance. And I said this at the top when we were describing the episodes. Oh, hello, welcome, new. Only caught the last 10 minutes, but I like the manga version because it's more willing to be abstracted, whereas I feel the anime spoon feeds the audience a bit more. I think the abstraction helps it to be more evocative. Yeah, I think there's something to the choice of metaphor use, right? Like there's the illusion is very realistic, realized, versus maybe like the doppelgangers are very metaphoric, larger than life, and so how those two play. Yeah, great response there. So I said this at the start when we were summarizing the chapters that we adapted, that this episode actually, doesn't end here. It goes on to do another chapter, and that one features another performance. This is by Kaisei Arcaro, who will become one of her rivals, and this is why I think there's, I want to highlight a few moments from that performance. Very short in both the manga and anime, a little bit longer, I think, in the anime. But honestly, in the manga, it's like maybe 2.5 pages of like actual performance. And in this story, it is a story of someone who has bad luck with women and goes to, I forget exactly what the person's job is, but essentially it goes to a woman to be like, hey, can you train me to to win women's hearts, and so she teaches him how to sing. Is like what so she has this very lovely singing voice, and then I don't actually have any of the things here, but when he sings back, he's really bad, and so it's actually like this subversion of the ability of this character to play two roles very distinctly. So in the manga and anime, we actually get some very similar frames and framing. Of course, the anime gives us color, plays with the light. Can't see it here because they're all stills, but a lot of these ones in the anime have like little like petals falling through the air. The tree branches even like grow and bloom in the background. It's very, very cool. There's literally, I think, the panel, this one right here. Oh, where's my laser pointer? This one right here is the singing panel. There's no music notes. There's no lyrics. We literally get in commentary. I think the next thing is someone saying, wow, his voice is really beautiful. So like it is fully told as a commentary what's happening there, but then you hear that, you kind of look up and you go like, okay, cool. We get a sense for what musically that sounds like. And then again, like in his sort of like title card, they do this for a lot of characters in their like first performance, or maybe even like throughout the series. They'll get like a shot of them, their title, and like a glamour shot, right? So we get a sense for the performance here. Now, I think what's really interesting is this is the same episode as her performance. I'm just going to kind of ask the question, between the two of them, having only seen some stills from this, or those of you who are watching who've watched both, who has the stronger performance in either the anime or the manga? I said I'm robbing you all of some commentary frames. Needless to say, everyone in the audience is like blushing, and there's lots of big, like flowery, petally moments. I will say I'm always harping on Nuna to do the homework, but really I do appreciate y'all just hanging out to hear me chat about comics for a thing you're like, yeah, you're following along with. But yeah, so in this episode, on my rule, I think again this is all very subjective. In my like rules for what I think they're trying to tell me about quality or performance, they're going to use more like bigger animation, which is to say, animating on more frames than not, moving more things, small amounts, using more dynamic lighting. Like this whole like bloom lighting effect we kind of get around his face is not present in Akane's performance earlier. I didn't even talk about, but like music, like the music and the sound here is like also very big and overwhelming. So there's a lot of things they're using to kind of sell this idea of quality on top of the commentary as well. And because they're in the same chapter, it's very easy, I think, to say that like, wow, his is better than hers is. And even in the manga, it's pretty clear that like he outshines her. But because the manga, I think, has a higher maybe baseline for both performances, and that, to use, I think, Steven's word of like intensity earlier, they almost made me feel a little bit closer, where I think in the anime episode, there's a wider divide. And so, like, seeing that, I think is really compelling to me, and why I kind of wanted to focus on this for today's lecture. Steven says, it's kind of interesting to see how differently things are portrayed between the two media. It feels like a different language in a few ways. Yeah, lots of things overlap, right? Like film and animation and comics are all going to use a lot of shared language. But there are just like, you get different tools. And I think one of the really intriguing things to me is because the anime brings us actual vocal performances and animation, we kind of move closer to realism, where there's less abstraction, and the closer we get, the closer we are to maybe compared to an actual Rakugo performance. And you'll see there have been, I think, not a ton, I don't want to say this is like the overwhelming thing, but there are definitely some people who are watching this and are feeling like, oh, the Rakugo isn't that good. Like I wish it was better. And I think the manga gets the sort of benefit of being like, they don't have to perform it. The artist just needs to depict to you things that you find impactful, beautiful, compelling, and you will interpret it as that's a really good performance. The moment you mix in a real or a closer approximation of it, that becomes what we get to judge things on. So it squishes things, it skews things. And I want to ask some questions here, which is like, what are some of the goals of an episode of an anime? And maybe what are the goals of a chapter of a manga? And how does the commercial needs of a production impact the story? So let that question linger for a moment. Money! Yep. Money. At one point this was going to be, I think, an animated slide, and I think I just didn't have time to go back and animate it with the commercial and be the last part, but I feel like you've read goals, you said money. We live in a space where almost all of our like mass media, all of our mass art is influenced some way or another of a commercial element, of a capitalist element. In order to make, an episode of anime of this caliber, quality, you need, or I should say within like this time frame, maybe is the best qualifier. You need a budget. You need to be able to pay so many people, your animators, your storyboarders, your performers, your voice directors, all the things in between. Production value. I want to say, like, I want to be clear that I think there's a lot of really great like people who've done like independent animation, who work on smaller budgets and other things, but oftentimes I think have the trade-off of time, right? Where it's like there's that benefit. So when you're working, I think like in a production of this sort of nature, like there's going to be some of those pieces. And so some of the goals are going to be, right, like you need to be able to, you're hoping to make a piece of media, and in the case of TV, you're making something to have ads in between them. And in manga, it's the same thing, right? The magazine that comes out, like, yes, you'll pay whatever, a few dollars to grab the magazine at the stand, and then there's going to be ads inside there to help kind of compensate for the costs. Those are pieces of it. I see these questions pop up. I'll get to them in a second here. But there's a few other things I think, even in like the goals of I'm totally spacing my question here, so just kind of get right into it. In this case, the anime has already had 12 episodes ordered. That has been signed off on. They're in production. They are going to make 12 episodes of this anime. And they at some point have gone through and they take the manga and they say, we're gonna do this story beat here, this story beat here, and so on. And they're probably trying to think through what's the full arc that we want to hit, so that when we get to the end of this first, like mini season, this cur, we'll have something really compelling people want to watch again, watch the next season, buy merch of, right? All those are pieces of it. And so the goal of the episode is, how do you then take some of these chapters and adapt them into a thing that feels right, or feels like a complete unit of storytelling. And manga in a lot of ways is very similar, but in this case, there's not necessarily an order for 12 episodes or 50 episodes. It's going to depend from person to person, contract to contract, where it's being published, etc. But in Weekly Shonen Jump, where you have, it's very reader survey based. Oftentimes, like, every magazine will have a survey at the back of, hey, what did you like? How did you rank them? And people who are way too zoomed in on this are constantly reading these every single week to see like how well did the manga that I like rank on this chart. Will they keep making more of it? And so the goals of a chapter take that same unit of storytelling and some of those, like, the needs to be big, and it almost shrinks them down a little bit. And so when we look at this single episode versus maybe these 3 chapters, each of these chapters needs to have kind of these bigger moments. So in the second chapter, the big moments are, a lot of it is not necessarily exposition, but a lot of story and world building kind of crammed in to kind of cover why she's doing what she's doing, and then kind of has this big moment of like her saying, hey, I'm going to go and perform, and that's like a nice big hook to get you to the next chapter. In chapter 3, her performance is kind of the peak, right? If you think about those story charts you've maybe seen of like, you want your climax to be really big, her performance is the heart of that chapter, and therefore it's elevated, I think, a lot higher. And then in the 4th chapter, it's his performance that is elevated a lot higher. And so if you were to maybe like chart these out, like these peaks sometimes kind of even out like in intensity, to use that same phrasing from before. But whereas the episode is also going to try to follow that same sort of peak where, hey, we want to make sure that, near 15 minutes in, we're having our big moment before we get into our like denouement and then our hook into the next episode. So these are, I think, the ways in which, like, in my mind, her performance is weaker here, but it's to serve the storytelling unit of the episode versus the storytelling unit of the chapter. Additionally, I think that the anime has the benefit of seeing, you know, by the time production started, probably at least 120, 150 chapters of this, and knowing where the story's going to go, knowing where her performances are going to go, knowing the things she's going to grow in or other characters are going to have, and then maybe chart her path there better. Because some of the things she's doing here are skills that you feel like she'll keep using, and sometimes you just have to rely on the commentators to say, wow, that was much better than the last time, but maybe it will look the same. So I do think there's room for them to kind of choose a different levels of representation for her, the quality of her art, that I'm really excited to kind of see what they do with. And interestingly, almost in the inverse of that, I think even her way she performs eating the manju is like relevant of stuff that comes up later in terms of how you might tell a story to involve like food or sensory details. So it's cool to see her using that earlier. But I'm going to pause there. Well, actually, I'll move on to my final thoughts slide as I go back and kind of read through what some of y'all are saying. So, student says the anime gets made after the media, right? So the anime would want to feel true to the manga as a result. Yeah, a lot of times, like certainly you want, I think most people, when they're looking at the adaptation, I like this series and now it's an anime, I hope it's going to be like representative of that. And I think it's really easy for some people to be kind of caught in the trap of like, I can only see the thing that I love in this one way, and therefore it needs to be this thing. Because I'm kind of like, you need to be able to take in the full scope of like what needed to happen to make this. What are the constraints of this medium? How do things maybe shift? What are things maybe learned or changed? So I'm very much someone who like celebrates the question about, hey, this changed, why? And get into like, ooh, this is good here and this is good there. Because again, no two things will ever be the same, right? It's anyone who's like, oh, the book was better than the movie, and it's like 9 times out of 10 it's going to be because the book can just do so much more with so much less, right? Like you don't need these $1 million budgets, and you also get, you know, endless more amount of like screen time with other things. So like there are going to be those shifts. I will say that generally, like, I don't know what the breakdown of this is. So I don't even want to say generally. Yes, I think a lot of the anime that is maybe most well known or popular is like adapted from manga, but they're also sometimes adapted from like short stories or like novels, and in some cases you'll get the anime, and then after the anime comes out they'll make a manga. You can look at the Dragon Ball of it all, which is crazy because there was a manga and then there was an anime and then there's the movies, and then they turned some of the movies into the manga, and then they turned that manga into an anime at one point, and it gets a little bit goofy. But yeah, there's different flows, but in this case, yeah, it's like manga first, then the anime, and you generally want things to feel close. But that is like a good space for discussion, I think, among the anime and manga nerds of like, how good is this series versus this series, or what did it do right or do wrong? And you, I think, get a lot of your biggest like disappointments and fan rage from series that will like completely pivot away from what the manga does to make a different ending. And if it's well liked, it's the best thing they ever did, and if it's hated, it's the worst thing ever, and how could they ruin my favorite thing? Other questions here. I think a TV episode, this is from Nunu, I think a TV episode has more of a compulsion to represent a discrete, complete story arc, whereas a chapter might not feel the need to do so. Agreed, right? Like we have expectations for both, and I think like one thing you will really feel when comparing like two, you know, chapters of a manga across like different series is like they almost always end with some big hook, some big question, some big please, dear God, please want to read this again next week because it's a lot riskier. So like, yeah, I think that is very common, but how they choose to use the rest of the space can really vary. And again, I think like your unit of storytelling of like a season versus an episode versus a scene are all really interesting to like to dig into. An original story maybe wouldn't have that as a goal, so maybe the manga doesn't have to have that as a goal. So this is the problem, me reading things a little bit late, unless it's based on something, obviously. Steven, if you don't mind, if you remember what that was, rephrasing that one, the original story wouldn't have what part of a goal? apologies for getting to this a little too late. Envy says, what metric does the studio look at when considering renewal? Yeah, huge goal, right? It's like, I don't know what it is for anime, and I know like in US television, you know, like we had the Nielsen rating, which is really just like either A, you get this weird box that was attached to your TV, or as I've actually had a few times, you get something mailed to you and they say, hey, fill out this survey and we'll send you like $20. And you go, I watched this show and I watched this show and I watched it for this much at this time. And that's how so much TV was figured out, because if enough people say I'm watching this thing, they can then go to the ads people and say, hey, we know people watch this much, so will you give us ads? And that is like often these big metrics for renewal. So for anime, I'm assuming it is something similar. I do know that oftentimes I don't know if this is completely true, but my understanding of it is like the like IP groups who will own the IP for, say, Akane-banashi, or I think Attack on Titan is maybe a good example of this. They like own the rights to making it, and they will then sell those rights to different studios to adapt parts of it. And so that's why you sometimes get a thing like Attack on Titan, which had like 3 years under one studio and then like 3 seasons under a different studio, because they didn't restart the whole show or reboot it. They picked it from that place, but that like IP group said, hey, we want to go with them instead. So there's other things that are going to be part of the metrics too. It's like, are you doing enough with our property? Because for their case, they're probably not making money off of ads, but maybe making more money off of like merchandising and like manga sales. And sometimes anime, you get a single season and its job is literally to sell more copies of the manga, and that's about as far as it goes. We've got a joke from Nunu. I've heard people talk about light novels, but how come nobody talks about dark novels or dog novels from Envy? That's a good question. I can do a lecture on dark novels later, or bark novels. Steven says, I meant the original manga wouldn't have the constraint of having to match an original version in a different medium. Yeah, totally, right? Like you don't have, that's a huge constraint. It's like you're choosing to adapt it. I do think that this one, we get a delight in the thought of we are adapting a form of storytelling. So they got their own things they have to worry about, but a lot more freedom in how they do it. They don't have to worry about the plot. I think you even see moments where like that guy reacting to the crowd is almost like a 1-to-1. Where was that? This dude. Like, they don't have to do this exact shot, but they choose to. And it's like, is that a, hey, this is easier for us to have this moment, so it's a lot less character design for us? Or is it a, we need to be loyal to this moment? Like, hard to say what drives something like that. Great discussion all around. Thank you all for coming through this next lecture. I think only Envy is here at the start, so I will bring up the agenda again. The absence of the sweat drop changes his expression a lot for me. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, there's just enough change here that I'm like, I do think. We'll go back. Oh, you know what? He does have one. It might be not coming through on the stream, but there is a almost in the exact same place. Honestly, to me, it's that his head's here. His head seems so much lower in the other one. He seems more like kind of like tightened up. I think in some way. I honestly, I'll be honest, like both of these, I don't think are maybe the strongest moments of either. I don't think they are clear in what they're trying to present. It does look more nervous, but I can also see where we're just like, man, this show's still happening. Like, it doesn't give me enough like fear as a sensation, personally. Critique the art you love, y'all. Okay, so I said at the top we have this agenda. We did class reminders, the adaptation report. We just finished our lecture. We're going to talk a little bit about some quick comics vocab to add to your comics vocab notebook that you all have. And I'm lying. There's a pop quiz. I said I'm a teacher. I said this is a class. You should have been ready for this. We're going to cover content from last week. Noah, someone does not do the homework. Good luck. But hey, I think you'll be able to figure this out. You know, I think some of these questions are written in such a way that they maybe lead you to find a good answer. You can write down the answers as you go along, and if you wish to, you can post your chat or post your score in the chat or in the comments. If that is the thing that makes you terrified or nervous, by all means, please do not worry about that. But this framing is just fun and trying to keep it consistent. So, which of these sound effects would imply the bell to sound louder? Is it A or is it B? I realized that I was supposed to. Oh no, I will. You can type the answer in, or you can just kind of follow along and do the full score. We're gonna go move this along. It is A, the louder one. Neither of these are making an active sound, but we generally perceive the caps to be louder. Who would you least expect to use this word balloon? Someone who is curious, someone who is mad, or C, someone who is excited? I do need like a timer for this slide. No, you do not need to type it in the chat. The instructions did say you follow on your own if you want to do a total score. And the answer is, again, A, someone who's curious. We get those big spiky balloons for mad people, or angry people, excited people, loud noises. What is most likely to use this balloon? A, an alien, B, a robot, C, a Rakugo. And of course, there may be some. I really had to be sure to use the word most because you could probably make arguments across the board about robot. Remember these spiky balloons? These like rectangular balloons with a few spikes are often tied to like electronic sounding voices, whether that's maybe a radio broadcast or a robot or something along those lines. What is most likely to use this word balloon? A, a child whispering, B, a talking animal, or C, a teacher presenting. Thank you for the robot appreciation. That was me drawing it with my mouse in PowerPoint. And the answer here for this is a child whispering. Could also be like an animal whispering or a teacher whispering, but whispering is kind of our key word here. And here's our tricky question. What is a technique used in the manga that was also used in the first episode of the anime to symbolize a strong performance? Is it A, animation, B, music or score, C, inset panels, or D, varied word balloons? And our answer is C, inset panels. We didn't explicitly talk about this. I used the phrase inset panel at some point last week. But you can also kind of work your way through that. The manga is not going to necessarily have animation. It doesn't have music or score built in. And we haven't seen any varied word balloons in the anime necessarily. Yes, we've heard different vocal performances, which is what they represent. But inset panels. And now, if you wish to, you can post your score in the comments or the chat, should you wish. If you are watching the VOD later, I'd love to know which ones you got, and if anything was tricky to you. Teaching's all about the data, right? They got to make sure the students are learning, otherwise they'll cut me as a teacher. Nunu said, let's go, I got all of them even though I didn't do any of the homework. Homework is for losers. Envy says 6, and Steven got 4. Oh, because you took one of Steven. Steven, you also got 5. Envy and Steven, you both got 5. Okay, so comics vocab lesson 1, because we didn't really talk about it in depth. We'll kind of cruise through this. This is just some random terminology in no particular order. We're talking about inset panels today. So this was the one my example and why it was in both. We have here. Great. So this definition comes from the website comicsdevices.com. It is an incredible website. I highly recommend you check it out sometime. As a writer of comics, there are so many different techniques or visuals or things that I sometimes want to convey to my artists that I'm working with, and I have to like doodle things or try to describe them. And this website's really helpful because it's starting to put some words or language on top of common conventions. Not necessarily the same, like it's inventing them, but it's a good reference, and I'll sometimes link to this website and say, hey, I want to do this thing, and here's the link to that for more information on what this thing is. So, the inset panel is a smaller bordered forepanel that sits above and inside a larger back panel, which, hooray, I'm teaching you new words with other words inside of it. But we see here, this little panel there, that's inside this bigger panel. Inset, inside, that's what it works for. And the anime does indeed have an inset panel, because while they're showing this, they also do these 4 little like mini fan panels here. And so this is a really cool moment where we kind of create a panel inside the anime. So again, there's room for word balloons at some other time. This is the graphic from comicsdevices.com where they've colored in the forepanel, the inset, and the back panel. So if I describe what that is, a forepanel, back panel, a panel that's placed above or behind other panels. So we have maybe our full meta panel here, and the 4 panel is this person who's maybe shopping. It looks like has a little shirt. Cause it looks like they're like a mall is what I want to read it as. Yeah, for that. Are the inset panels tell us that's indeed what's going on, right? We're looking at some shirts, we're holding one up, and the back panel is like everything in the background. So these all come together to create maybe a certain image. And if we were to take the manga here, we can kind of highlight in the same sort of colors. We've got our back panel, which is mostly just being used for some speed lines to kind of, again, increase that intensity. We've got the inset panels, which are some of the flashbacky moments that she's recalling. And then our 4 panel is her performing in the moment. And what's really cool, if you remember from last week when we were talking about this is a scene where she's recalling a story. And so we get to see her in the moment doing the performance. And the inset panels are an easy way for us to get that sort of flashback context. So that is your vocab words for the day: inset panel and 4 panel and back panel. Put them in your notebook, and then make sure to put your notebook in the bin. Don't put your notebook in your backpack and forget it at home again. Stop doing that, please. That's going to kind of wrap it up for the main content today. I will say there's a few ways you can support me. So first of all, thank you just for watching, for being here. I super appreciate it. If for nothing else, this has been it's a joy to talk about comics. It's fun to share this, and so even just giving me the time each week to sit down and slow down and read a series I really like and get to talk about it or even just appreciate it more is a vibe. As Steven says, slam that subscribe button. Like the video, slam the subscribe button. Nunu, if you were not previously subscribed, I think that makes me hit my goal then. Because my like little widget isn't set yet to like go, hey, they subscribed. Can one of you who's on the channel, because if I open it, I might start doing double audio. How many subs do I got? Do we hit 10? Do we do it? Boom! That's a goal reached in two versions of this. Fantastic! Thank you all so much. But yeah, you can support me just by watching, by sharing this, by commenting if there's if there's a moment in this that you really liked, a moment that you want me to hear more about, if there's something you saw in the last episode you want me to talk about, or in the manga that you want me to talk about, please, post in the comments. It's probably one of the best ways to get that information to me. Otherwise, I've also been posting a lot in the Akane-banashi subreddit, so you can, post there or DM me there if you have any question but you don't want to do it. I should probably get one of those like little boxes that you'd have in a classroom. You could drop a thing, and if you have a question but you don't want anyone to know you asked that question, which will just be like a Google form. So maybe I'll set up a Google form for y'all who have questions you may be too embarrassed to ask, even if there are no dumb questions. Oh, it did. Did y'all hear that little thing go? Look at that! I thought it wasn't working. Would you look at that? It worked. Well, thank you for subscribing. Oh, I'm still on this other side. Why am I seeing 2 different versions of my notes? That's fine. Other ways you can support me. Ko-fi, I had this up forever ago, and I've dusted it off ever so slightly. Ko-fi.com/Borderless Comics, where you can just, shoot me a few dollars as a little tip if, the idea is like a cup of coffee. No pressure, truly. I think there's some world where I will try to be getting up like a Patreon, or there's actually that really cool co-op equivalent. But in the effort of keeping things simple for this project, I have not dove into that yet, so I'm not really worried about that. And then I think one of the other ways you can support me is if you are buying books, any books, if you go to this link first, which is bookshop.org/shop/Mauleon, Mauleon. That brings you to my store where, yes, you can go and see the books that I've written, and you can order them if you wish to, because the books that I've written are all right for hire. I do not get commissions on, or I don't get royalties on them, like you might get from a book that is published through a bigger publisher. Any copy that's sold, it happens. I get my money all up front when I write it. But I put it on that website so you can go and write it, and then I do get a commission from the website of 10%. But if you're also like, look, guy, I like you talking about comics. I don't necessarily know if I'm going to like your books. They are for people who are not, maybe for younger audiences, or maybe not my vibe. If you use that link and you go and buy copies of Akane-banashi or any other book through that link, I'll still get a little bit of a cut. So that's one way to support me. And also means you're not buying on Amazon. Bookshop is a great website that supports indie shops around the country. So if you don't actually want to support me, you can just find your local indie bookstores on there, have them set as your bookshop, and then they will get a cut of those purchases. And a lot of indie bookstores I know actually really like this practice because they can't always offer everything that Amazon does, but this still is a way for you to support your small indie bookstores. So that is it for the main content and for my little plug. Thank you all so much. And your bonus is whatever mess this is going to be. This is me. I think I'm going to try to record a YouTube short live. We'll see how that goes. Which is to say, I don't want to get in the world of editing things. I just want to be able to, like stitch some stuff together. So what we're going to do is I'm ever so briefly going to adjust my. I want those 3 connected vertical speech balloons with you from the end of the last quiz last time. You didn't get the answer. Oh, that cliffhanger. Yes, that. So Envy is speaking about. I don't have it here right now. I did leave a cliffhanger, which was what are these speech balloons mean? What do they stand for? That is what we get to talk about here. Whenever we get to like chapter 15 in the manga, we will talk through those balloons. So that's gonna be somewhere in stream episode 5 to 8. If you're like, yo, let me know when that happens, I'll let you know when that happens. But I gotta leave that hook out there. You understand? But I will let you know. Like it's gonna be a little bit before we answer that one. Gives you more time to think about it. You're gonna have to keep watching to find out. But yeah, so I'm going to do this. I need to adjust one more thing because for whatever reason, let's see, Akane frame. We're gonna duplicate this and see if it breaks everything. Paste a duplicate. Good. It mildly broke things, but we hide it from horizontal. Cool. We show it in the vertical. It's floating around there in the vertical one. Oh, it's locked. That's why I want to unlock it. What's great is y'all who are watching this on desktop, which I have to assume is all of you, or at least not watching the shorts version of this, are like, what is he up to? What is he doing right now? And I'm moving. I have a vertical version of this going right now, and so I need to just make it so the frame isn't mostly like without color. So we're gonna put that there. Great. Okay, that's good enough of a framing. And I'm here, and that thing's in place, and we're all set to go. And you guys just get to watch me live perform things, and we're gonna probably, we're gonna try to do it in one take, but let's be real, that's not gonna happen. I'm gonna trip things up. And these are 2 more little like fun comic tidbits from these last chapters, so hopefully you'll find them also interesting. And I know for a fact, you can hear me rambling in fear. I'm nervous to record this, which is the great entry. I'm nervous to record this short because we're going to talk about what is missing from episode 2 of Akane-banashi. In episode 2 of Akane-banashi, Akane is nervous about going on stage. It is her first time she's been performing for her coach, for her master, for about 6 years in practice, but never in front of an audience. And Guriko, who she's there with, teaches her a trick, which is you use a symbol for people, you write it on your dominant hand, and then you swallow it. And this act is like swallowing your fear. It's a cool gesture. I forgot to include the screenshot here, but she then goes and eats. She does it multiple times over and over and over again, trying again to like eat the audience, to dominate the audience, to shake off some of that fear. This visual, or the thing though, the episode ends on a different sense of fear, which is says he's scared most of her and her strongest skill. He says, what? She's no longer worried. You're the most scariest thing out there, which mirrors what happens in the manga. But in the manga, they're doing something a little bit differently, which is, look at her hand. She has the same gesture right there for dominating the audience that she has for eating the manju, which I think you get the nice like English pun of like man and manju. But this moment of facing your fears is also what the story is about. We get this great layering of story. And there's one scene that is not adapted from these chapters into the anime, which happens right at the top of the episode, which is Guriko really, really nervous about what happens if someone finds out that his master is hanging out with a young woman who it turns out to be his Akane, and they're just practicing. And we get this great shot of him with his hand over his mouth. So across this chapter, or these 2 chapters, we get a really good motif of fear, and both of these, the themes are really focused on fear, which almost begs the question, well, if they're taking these out of the episode, what's the episode's theme? And if you want to know that, you'll have to come check out my live streams. I live stream about Akane-banashi every Tuesday at 7 o'clock Eastern from now until June 23rd. So please come check it out. And that's a short. It could have been better, could have been worse of a recording. I liked my intro into it. Mumbled a little bit. I think... is that good enough? Do we care? Yeah, that's good enough. Again, low effort, right? We got another one I was going to record too. I did want to look. Oh, here's what I will say, because I don't know if I actually talk about the theme. The theme of this episode is teaching. They add a performance in for Guriko at the start of the episode where he's talking. It's like 2 lines from a story about teaching, and Kaisai's his opening performance, his opening prologue is about wondering who Akane's teacher is, and so they swapped one of the bigger arcing themes of the episode to be around teachers and who are your teachers versus the smaller stories kind of focusing on fear. And I had skipped over, so here's where my other one is. Great, here's the YouTube maintenance. Okay, I've showed this at the top. If I make the short, do I want this music in the background? If it's one take, it's fine. Welcome to productions. Okay, so, but do you need more intense music? Is the Animal Crossing music okay when it's your live stream? Is it not okay when it's your thing? Again, rambling. This is a man who does not want to record a thing, even though he's actually been recording for an hour and a half. So, what is wrong with this page from Chapter 3 of Akane-banashi? I'll let you take a look at it. Oh, we're going to restart that. I should click there. Hold on. Cut! What's wrong with this page from Chapter 3 of Akane-banashi? Let me take a moment to take a look. Let me zoom in a little bit more. Can y'all see what it is yet? Feel free to pause. Alright, we'll get a little closer. Says Steven. Alright, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It says word balloon tails. Oh no! You've crossed the streams. What do I do? This is considered a pretty big mistake in comics, as you almost never, ever want to be crossing those word balloon tails. You try to avoid this at all costs. It is very much a rookie mistake. So what the hell is it doing in Chapter 3? You know, you critique the things you love. But what can you do if this happens? One, you could redraw the art. You could stage these people on opposite sides, so you still get that same moment. But as someone who is a comic writer and not a comic artist, boy oh boy, if I've messed up somehow, or we've gotten this far along, last thing I want to do is ask the artist to redraw it, so I've got some other options. I might rewrite the dialogue to fit the staging, so we can keep the balloons in roughly the same place, but maybe we just put the tails to each other and tweak the dialogue in some way to hopefully get the same point across. Or you could lower the balloon and use a bouncy balloon tail. What's a bouncy balloon tail? Well, it's something that this creative team has used in Chapter 1, and as of yet I haven't seen in other comics, not to say it started here, but personally I've not come across it, and it looks kind of like this. Look at that balloon tail. It bounces. You have 2 characters that their balloon tails are no longer crossing, but you are still committing a pseudo-comic sin by having the woman who's on the left have her balloon on the right as the first thing you'd see. Normally you want your balloons to be closest to the speaker, but that isn't always the case. So what do? They make this bouncing balloon tail to kind of have the idea of the sound maybe hopping over, and then the reverse as well. And honestly, works great. So this is something you can do, and I talk about more comic craft things like this in my weekly live streams every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Talk about Akane-banashi, the anime that is out right now, and the comics. I hope you come and join. Okay, that's another short. Yeah, I saw that. I was reading through it. I was like, y'all messed up. You shouldn't be doing this. You should be knowing better. I think part of it is because they really want to tease this little guy who's creeping. And then his next on the page turn, he jumps over and he kind of tackle glomps Akane, to use a very anime word. And so I think they wanted to stage him closer, but I think there's other ways to do it. And in the anime, they've actually flipped them, which is funny because the word balloon location doesn't matter in the anime, but in the anime, they've actually flipped them on the page, and they get the benefit of knocking Guriko out of the way, and it's actually more compelling. So hey, you should know. Especially with just two people, you only have to vaguely point the tails in the direction to have the person talking. Yeah, it's. I don't know why the little bouncy balloon does so much work, but there's something about that shape being just unique enough that it catches that I don't think I've ever really been tripped up on that front. And even here, like this, you have a lot of things lending you to who your reader is going to be or who your speaker is going to be. So like this is a good follow up for this. But on a scan, you might like link these two and then have to do double take. And anytime you do double takes like that, it's great. Here's the thing. I kind of hate the bouncing ball tail because I don't think visually it's like the most enjoyable thing. But I've never found it to like take me out of it or like be very distracting. I think on like when you highlight it, it looks weird, but when I'm just reading through it, it doesn't come up to me. And quite frankly, there's so much manga out there that just chooses to have no tails whatsoever, and I just have to wing it. And oftentimes you're dealing with like fan translations or other things, so the voices are not strong between characters, or there's other modifiers that have all been just shrunk down to the same font. That, ooh, good look out there. I think the last thing I'll say here, as I kind of close this up, is also I like comics that do this. I like when you throw little chibi heads in there. You don't also have to do it, but like it's cute, it works, it's easy. It just make it less work for people to understand what you're trying to say. Yeah, helps you with the purpose. It's a vibe thing, totally. Yeah, same thing with this, right? Like it serves to clarify. You get moments where you maybe want to choose to confuse your reader, but not a moment like this. But yeah, thank you all for hanging out. I truly appreciate it. This is a lot of fun. I'm closer to the time I want to be, 90 minutes. Great. And we'll see y'all next week. Don't forget to get your permission slip signed for our field trip to Japan. That's due on